Going to be under arrest. So turn around.
He's not resisting.
First, there was Mahmoud Khalil, arrested at Columbia University in New York on March 8th. Then there was Tufts University student Rumeysa Ozturk, detained by ICE agents on March the 25th in Massachusetts. And now, Mohsen Mahdawi, another Columbia student, who went for a US citizenship interview in Vermont. But he was handcuffed and detained, another student part of the Trump administration's clampdown on higher education. Channel 4's Unreported World met Mohsen last January.
The university has been biased against the pro-Palestine groups.
He grew up in a Palestinian refugee camp and had been a green card holder for 10 years.
Palestine will be free!
He was a key voice in protests at Columbia's campus against the war in Gaza.
Of Columbia University, systemic discrimination against the pro-Palestinian voices. Shame on you, Columbia!
Shame on you! Shame on you!
While Mohsen was not part of the encampment and occupation later that year that saw police make arrests, that moment was pivotal. For pro-Palestine groups, it was an assault on free speech and protest. For others, it was a hostile disruption of university life with accusations of anti-Semitism.
Every country in the world has to take back people that are illegally in another country.
That cause was taken up by the Trump team, who vowed to deport so-called student radicals, with Marco Rubio saying he's revoked hundreds of visas of people he's deemed lunatics.
If you come to this country as a student, we expect you to go to class and study and get a degree. If you come here to vandalize a library, take over a campus and do all kinds of crazy things, we're going to get rid of these people.
The Trump administration has facilitated the arrest of students like Mahmoud Khalil on the basis that his presence as the leader of pro-Palestine protests is a threat to the foreign policy of the United States.
Houses in Gaza have been destroyed.
Mohsen's lawyers argue that's what he's also being held for, a clear violation of his First Amendment free speech rights, along with no evidence that he's behind any anti-Semitism incidents on campus.
He was beloved by so many people. He worked night and day to try and build bridges between communities that were incredibly at odds, and made progress in doing so and brought people together who otherwise never would have sat in the same room. So there's tremendous grief right now and anger.
The White House recently called for changes from Columbia, threatening to withhold $400 million in funds unless they adopted a formal definition of anti-Semitism and hired an internal security force. But while Columbia agreed, Harvard has resisted demands from the White House. The Trump administration sent a letter to Harvard calling on the university to allow more government oversight and enforce changes to not just tackle anti-Semitism on campus, but also end all diversity, equity and inclusion policies, and regarding international students, prevent admitting those hostile to American values. In a response from Harvard's lawyers, the university said it had already taken steps to address anti-Semitism on campus and said it will not surrender its independence or relinquish its constitutional rights. Neither Harvard nor any other private university can allow itself to be taken over by the federal government.
This is an important and unprecedented moment. I've never seen anything like this in my experience fighting for free speech and academic freedom on campus.
The Trump administration has now said it will freeze $2 billion in funding to Harvard, with free speech campaigners saying this is a major showdown.
There may be serious allegations of anti-Semitism, but the way to adjudicate serious allegations of anti-Semitism is through the legal process, not through unilateral demands and directives from the federal government. And unfortunately, the Trump administration is just not following the law.
Protests have taken place across the country since students became part of the administration's clampdown. Trump supporters claim it's a legitimate attempt to combat discrimination and violence on campus. Critics say that it's just a front for a White House wanting to control everyone and everything in America.
Kieran Moodley reporting. A little earlier, I spoke to Andrew Crespo, a law professor at Harvard, vowing to stand up to the White House. And I asked him if the government wasn't right to try to eradicate anti-Semitism and promote viewpoint diversity.
Anti-Semitism is vile. It has no place in any society. But let's be really clear. This is not about anti-Semitism. This is about authoritarianism. We know that from what the Trump administration has said and from what it is doing. When Donald Trump ran for president, he said that he was going to try to break the backs of American universities because he didn't like what they were teaching. He claimed that we were all Marxist leftists, and that he wanted to make sure that what was taught in American universities was what he wanted to be said, that his message would be the syllabus, that these universities would become Trump University as opposed to Harvard University. The reason they want to do that is because they know, just like we know, that across the globe and across time, one of the central bulwarks against authoritarianism in countries is the core institutions of their free society: the press, the courts, the legal profession, universities. Those are the institutions that we are seeing.
So you don't accept that this is about viewpoint diversity, that he believes there's too much, you know, liberal thought or on the left thought, as we would say here?
Universities thrive on diverse opinion. I teach every year standing up in front of 200 students. The amount of diversity in that classroom and viewpoints is something that is what makes it so exciting to teach these students. What is inconsistent and incompatible with what Trump is saying and what he's talking about is he wants to dictate what he thinks counts as viewpoint diversity, and he wants to be the final judge of what is spoken. Let's be really clear. He doesn't want viewpoint diversity. He wants universities saying what he wants to be said. He wants to control the ideological agenda of the country, and he wants to do it by trying to bend universities to become echoes of what he wants to be said.
You know, we've talked about this being a costly strategy. It is also a risky strategy, perhaps. We've seen the president take on the media, law firms, other universities. We saw Columbia essentially give in to the demands when its funding was threatened. Are you worried about standing alone here?
I'm not worried about standing up, because Columbia is a really valuable lesson. Columbia was threatened with $400 million. The money was taken away. Columbia acceded and basically, gave in to those demands, and it didn't get the money back. Instead, it saw more funds frozen. The price of capitulation is further bullying. What is needed is to stand up. But you're absolutely right that standing up alone is dangerous. The United States government is powerful. It's certainly more powerful than Harvard University. Where this goes is what you need is to have broad, coordinated solidarity across these sectors. You need moral leadership and coordinated moral stands, not just by one institution that's being targeted, but by entire sectors. Higher education as a sector needs to stand up. Law firms as a sector need to stand up. And we're starting to see that. We're starting to see encouraging signs of real leadership and moral courage. That's why our faculty chapter filed this lawsuit last week. We are trying to show that there is the capacity for courage, and that courage inspires more courage. These types of attacks are unconstitutional, they're undemocratic, they can't stand, and they will be contested in courts, and they will be contested by the American people.
I mean, there's certainly, at the moment, doesn't look like much chance of President Trump himself standing back or standing down. He said today on Truth Social that you could lose your tax-exempt status and be taxed as a political entity, with the phrase, remember, tax-exempt status is totally contingent on acting in the public interest. He's not backing down, is he?
He doesn't seem to be backing down right now, although the president does change his mind rather frequently. My hope is that when he sees how the courts react, and I hope that the courts will actually uphold the First Amendment values that we are trying to vindicate in our lawsuit, that he will respect those court rulings. This is an essential moment to try to defend the core of the First Amendment in American universities. What Donald Trump is threatening, whether it's removing tax-exempt status, removing billions of dollars, it is plain and simple retaliation and punishment and coercion to try to get private actors, like teachers and their students, to speak differently or to speak less. Our Constitution does not allow that, and that's why we're fighting back against it.
Professor Crespo, thank you very much for talking to us today.
Thank you so much for having me.